Good evening, everyone who is joining us, and you're very welcome, and welcome to all those that are going to be joining us as well. This is the first of one of our marketing webinars. We haven't actually had a marketing webinar for a while. We took a bit of a break, as you know, and I know we're very busy too. And do watch out, we're going to be publishing the list of all our webinars, marketing and business and viticulture and winemaking, over the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for that. But I'm really pleased that we're kicking off tonight with this particular webinar. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Don't forget that I'm sure all of you are very familiar with how these Zoom webinars work, but don't forget that you are very welcome to join in both in the chat room and also using the Q&A thing at the bottom. Please feel free to ask any questions. This presentation is actually going to be entirely delivered by Ned Orty, who I'll introduce in a tick. I'll be in the background, I'll be monitoring all the questions and also looking at the chat room. So if you've got the chat open, please feel free to say hello. Ned, I'm sure, would love to see people saying hello and introduce themselves, so he has an idea of who's online. So let's move on to tonight's presentation, all about consumer marketing and strategy. So understanding your consumer, who they are, their needs and habits is fundamental to your business strategy, to your brand and to the products you create, and also, of course, how to market them. So this webinar is going to set out a comprehensive overview of what these different elements are and why they're so important to you. I can tell you that the slides are packed with plenty of information and guidance, and you can find out how all of these components fit together into a cohesive business plan to help you drive your businesses forward and to achieve tangible results. Now, I'm sure some of you know Ned, and some of you that know his parents down at Oakley Vineyard might see that there's a very recognizable face there, really. We're really lucky to have you, Ned, and you're very welcome. Ned has those unique qualities that combine knowledge of our industry. He grew up at Oakley with about 20 years of experience working in R&D and marketing and strategy development and with a global FTSE 100 company. I'm sure, Ned, you'll be introducing yourself a little bit more in a minute. So we're really lucky that Ned can speak both from science and from marketing, but also with that inherent knowledge of our own industry as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Ned. I'm going to disappear in the background. Ned will have a series of slides to show you. As I say, please ask your questions in the Q&A. I can see a few people jumping on the chat, which is brilliant. Ned, I'll hand over to you, and I will pop back a bit later to address some of the questions. Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Julia, for a lovely introduction. Good evening, everyone. Firstly, I hope your harvests are going well. So I've got a lot of material to go through, so do stop me if I'm going too fast. I will try and dedicate the time to the things that I feel are most important. So without any further ado, let's just start. As with all kind of agency things, there needs to be a disclaimer. This is essentially just to say that I talk about a few things in here which I think some people might be a bit sensitive to, with regards to recent conversations around market fairness and everything else. This is just me creating some material to facilitate a dialogue. Okay, so let's start with the aim. I attended the first marketing conference earlier in the year, and I heard a lot of talk about needing more consumer understanding. And so what I'm going to try and aim to do tonight is demystify what consumer understanding really means, and provide a base level of kind of what consumer understanding means and demonstrate how that should be fundamental to all aspects of your business. And that's your business strategy, it's your branding, it's your products, the experiences, services. I'll just call them products as we move forward because that's a bit of a mouthful. And then finally your marketing, and really that's the kind of order in which big companies look at these kind of things. So they start with the consumer and end with the marketing. And I hope within this that there are a number of tools that you'll be able to take away and kind of do some self-appraisal and increase your consumer understanding within your business. Okay. So a bit about me. Julia's already covered quite a lot of it. I grew up on a vineyard with my parents, planted in the 80s. Went to Cardiff University, studied chemistry, went off, met my wife, had a career, and I'm now lucky enough to have 2 young twins. There they are at this year's harvest. And then from a professional point of view, I worked for 20 years at British American Tobacco. It's a big global organization. I started in R&D, discovered I didn't really much like chemistry after all, and then spent a lot of my time working in marketing. And this was in the kind of consumer insight area, and then brand, product, and innovation strategy. And then at the very end, I moved into a strategy role, a strategic science role, which was looking for kind of billion-dollar disruptive opportunities in existing and new categories. You might have heard about the work going on in vaccines in tobacco, and that's the kind of thing we were looking at. At the start of the year, I took the opportunity to take voluntary redundancy, been there 20 years. It seemed a logical step to facilitate the transition to the vineyard. I've created my own strategy and innovation consultancy because that seemed an appropriate thing to do. And also looking to, like I say, transition to Oatley Vineyard and take over the reins there as and when mum and dad get tired of all the pruning. So throughout the presentation, this is the thing that's in the top of my mind. And this is kind of like a pretty classic marketing funnel. And what it says is that growth is driven by awareness. Now, you'll see a whole different number of marketing funnels throughout the internet, and then you can pick and choose what you want. I like this one because it's not overly complicated. You start with awareness. If people don't know you exist, they can't buy your products. And then you move into the engagement, consideration, and purchase. So this is where you're persuading people that yours are the products that they need and should be buying. And then if you're really lucky, you can turn some of these people into champions. The word advocate gets used quite a lot as well. But this is always top of my mind when we're running through this presentation. And to create awareness kind of effectively and efficiently, you really need to understand your consumers. And Julia and Joanna have been doing a great job at the category level. The WineGB Instagram account is growing quite rapidly, but the onus is on each and every one of us to champion ourselves and the industry, because it's a tough market out there. So how do we do this? 3 M's, what I like to call them. And they're kind of the foundation for any business selling value to consumers. And by value, it comes back to that product. Is it services? Is it anything people will pay money for? You start with the market. So what are you selling? Why are you selling it? And who are you selling it to? And critically, I think for me, will this work in the long time? Then you've got the message. So do people understand why they should be buying your products over anyone else's? How's your proposition relevant? I hope over the course of this presentation, you'll begin to understand why I talk about brand rather than products as well. It might sound a bit like a marketing agency thing, but if we think of ourselves as brands from the start, I'll demonstrate that should be more effective. And then finally, the media. So how are you getting your message out there? Are you getting it to the right people in the right way, through the right channels? Everyone consumes media in a different way. So how are you building awareness for that? So let's start with the market. I'm going to spend a bit of time on this because I feel that if we understand this properly, the rest of it should fall into place a little bit easily, or a bit more easily anyway. And within this, we're going to talk a bit about market strategy, and then we're going to talk about how companies kind of view different markets through consumer segmentation models, and then how those segmentation models lead us to deriving values and needs for these consumers. And it's the values and needs that are really critical in this whole kind of consumer marketing space. So market strategy, the essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. I really like this because essentially you cannot be all things to all people. And the clearer you are about what you want to be, what you want to deliver, what your goals are, the easier they are to achieve. And this is kind of from a basic fundamental time management point of view, but also from a very big company strategic level point of view. This is something I kind of live by, really. So when you're starting a business or entering a category, it is important to consider how the market is changing when you're planning your business strategy. Consumer behavior is central to the supply and demand equation. So, you know, consumers should be right at the heart of your strategy right from the start. And if we just take a look, I mean, you would normally do some form of scenario planning around this, and scenario planning usually involves kind of looking at trend analysis, pestle analysis, so political landscape and that kind of thing. It's a whole big webinar in itself. You could spend days talking about it. So just to exemplify what I mean, based on some of the recent discussions in and around WineGB, from a supply side, we're all aware that there's an oversupply of English sparkling wine, and logically that will at some point lead to increased competition. Increased competition leads to reduced prices. Reduced prices will lead to producer consolidation, and you know, this is highly consistent with established agricultural boom bust cycles. I mean, here we talk about New Zealand wine, Australia wine, Champagne is starting to bring in limits, Prosecco has started to bring in limits, but it's not just wine, it's any agricultural business. And those are trends, you can see them happening, you can be relatively sure about when they're happening as well. So if you then though consider the demand side, we know that sparkling wine only makes up a small component of total UK wine sales. I mean, even my most sparkly friend only buys probably 5 bottles a month, yet most of my other friends drink still wine pretty much every night, or within UK government guidelines, I suppose. So we also know that UK vineyards often have very high value marketing assets. So talk about vegan, we're talking about local experience and all of the other good things that we've got going on. And the consumer trends indicate that these assets will become more increasingly relevant for a whole variety of reasons. So, you know, locally produced, carbon footprint, all of that kind of thing. So the question for everyone is really, is your business viable in the long term? And where is your demand coming from? And your demand comes from understanding what consumers want and how you're providing it to them. Okay. Hope that's clear. So the way companies understand and tease apart that demand side within the market is through consumer segmentation models. And consumer segmentation models allow us to split the market into what's known as typologies. And this is to analyze how and where the demand comes from, and it's used to uncover opportunities and threats. Here we have on the screen a segmentation model that I created from the WineGB social media data. Segmentation models, they have 2 axes. So typically one is something to do with consumer behavior, and then one is something to do with business relevance. So here we've got engagement, and we know what the engagement is by how many people are interacting with the WineGB social media. I expect this could be updated since I access the data. And then spend power, low to high, comes from understanding a bit about each of the groups. And with that, I'm talking about the demographics, so, you know, kind of where they live, their age range, that kind of thing, their situation and behaviors. So could it be that their kids have moved out, gone home at university, or you've just bought your first flat? And then the type of behaviors you have with regards to products and such like. And they all will have different sets of values and needs, and values and needs are fundamentally critical to understanding consumers and how you market or you create your brand and your products. So they're going to be quite a strong reference throughout the presentation. And if you can know all of this, then it allows you to identify opportunities to either enhance what you're currently doing or to find new opportunities. And it also lets you identify some threats. So if we just kind of unpack that a bit further, looking at what we've got, we only have information about the people who are interacting with WineGB social media. So you can see that down in the bottom left, people with low spending power and people with low engagement in our category. Pretty sure lots of those people drink wine as well. So there is a threat potentially to everyone's current model if someone comes in and meets against that consumer group. We've got family first. These are people a bit like me, a bit like my friends, where, you know, you're mid-career, you're kind of relatively comfortable in your life, but kids take up an awful lot of your time. We would happily drink English wine if we kind of knew how to get hold of it easily and everything else. But frankly, we just buy what's easy from the Wine Society or from Waitrose or whatever shops happen to be able to service our needs quickest and easiest. You got the boomers, you know, 65 plus. They've got lots of spare time on their hand, really into kind of investigating different products, where they come from, nuances about how they're made and that kind of thing. Nest flown, kids have just gone to university, suddenly finding themselves with lots of spare time on their hands. What do we do with that? From observations of people I know, they tend to start traveling around the country, well, or the world, but that doesn't happen at the moment. They travel around the country right now and have got the time to do kind of UK tourism. So you can start to kind of think about things that might work for that cohort there. But I like to look for opportunities. And what we've got a really big opportunity here for, I feel, is with experientials. So I'm going to use them as an example as we run through this. I'll go into much more detail with this. So experientials, demographically, they're typically aged 25 to 34. They're skewed towards female. They don't have any children and likely to be single. In a medium income job, they have some disposable income. They're aspirational. They want to progress, but not a homeowner yet. You know, shares accommodation with their friends or parents. You know, so looking at shared experiences here. Obviously concerned about the future, not just extinction, rebellion and that kind of thing, but buying a house and just the fundamental day-to-day necessities. Behaviorally, many different interests typically, but they tend to be broad and not deep due to easy access to information. Their consumption tends to be both aesthetic and experience driven, which in shorthand basically means Instagram. Is it Instagrammable? Can they share it with their friends? Self-congratulatory spends, they don't really have anything else to spend their money on, so they like to treat themselves. Active social medias across all platforms, a holistic view of health and mind. This is something I find particularly interesting in this kind of age group and a bit younger, because people from my generation tend to talk about mental health and physical health as different things. Nowadays, it's just the same thing. You know, when people talk about health, they understand the link between your mind and your body and what happens there. Obviously worried about environment. Social media is the primary source of information for trying new products, and that might be friends or influencers. You know, there's a whole wealth of places you can get advice from. What you then do for these groups is that you create personas. And personas help us get under the skin of each of these people. So I won't go to this into full detail. The slide is available afterwards. But you know, here's Rachel. She's 28 years old. She lives in Brighton in a flat she's rented with her flatmate. She brunch culture, preoccupied about image. Spends her weekends chilling. She does yoga and soul cycle. So can really start to get a feeling of the kind of things that she's into and the kind of values that she has. And I've just called out some values here, just as an example. There are obviously more, but if we think, you know, we know she's aspirational, so she wants a better future. She's progressive, so the old way isn't necessarily the best. We need new thinking to build a better future for everyone. Not materialistic, this is pretty interesting. Obviously the rise of Netflix and such like is that no one has a DVD collection anymore. So subscription models are here to stay, and nowadays you can even get a Volvo on subscription. John Lewis have just announced that they're going to be doing clothes and fashion on subscription. So this is something that has had quite an impact on this cohort and this generation of people. Ownership is not the desirable thing it used to be, unless it's a home. And it's aesthetic and purpose. You know, it has to look good and have a real reason for being, looking for authenticity here, being the watchword. And that then you can imagine translates into what her needs are in the context of our industry. So she has needs about experiences with added value. So, unlikely to spend £10 plus on a bottle of wine at a supermarket, maybe a bit more if they're out, but happily spend £50 an hour, well, £50 for a tour and a tasting. Progressive premium, so value, sustainability, and human stories. These are the things that are premium, not the traditional premium cues, gold lettering and that kind of thing. And there has to be an element of talk value so that it can be shared with her friends, even those who aren't into the same topics and subjects. So we're talking about tangible benefits in normal language to share with friends. So just for example, hand harvested for better taste or better quality, take your pick, rather than 2 weeks on the lees. And these combined, so the personas that have led us to the values and the needs are used to create brands, products, services, experiences, and everything else. And typically a big company will do all of this kind of thing before they even decide what products they're likely to make. So just to kind of sanity check all of that, we've just talked through Rachel, our experiential, in quite a lot of detail. We've discussed her needs and her values. And if we go back and think about that in the context of another segment within our market or within our segmentation, you can intuitively tell that there's going to be different requirements from the products and different values. Now, ideally or critically, some of these values will overlap, and that's the key to unpicking a brand and products that work across multiple segments. So, quick checklist on market analysis. So, strategically, how are you going to compete in 5 years' time? And I've said 5 years because that's how long it takes for the vines to start producing. It may as well be 10 years or even next year. But are you clear on your proposition, on your position within the future markets? What are your key opportunities and threats? Talking about some of the trends in the industry earlier, are you prepared for those? Do you have a plan? And who are your target consumers? Do you know this? Do you understand their values and needs? And these are all fundamental to long-term business sustainability. So any questions yet, Julia, just while I take a drink?
Not yet, Ned. I think people are absolutely. I'm actually sitting riveted in it as well. So sorry, Ned. You'll have to.
No problem. No problem. I'll move on as just a water sip. So, do people why they should buy your brand over alternatives? And essentially, is your proposition relevant? You'll know if it really is not relevant because you won't be selling much wine. But let's kind of unpack that a bit further. And we're going to talk a bit about purchase psychology. Then we're going to talk about brand identity. And then we're going to talk about simplicity of message, which and this will help us understand why the brand is more than important than the product. So I really like this quote. I've done quite a lot of work with Darryl. He's written many books on this kind of thing, but people buy things for two reasons. And that's the right reason, and it's the real reason. And from a psychology point of view, the right reason is the rational benefits. This is how you explain your purchase to other people. It's got a 0 to 60 of this. It's got yay, fuel economy, those kind of things. But the real reason you make purchases is because of how these things make you feel. And this is all the more important if you are trying to sell a premium product. After all, a Rolex doesn't tell better time than a Seiko. So the emotional connection and the real reason that people buy expensive products is because of how they make you feel. And conveniently, given everything that I've just talked about, this translates into the rational benefits. So this is the needs of your consumers, and more specifically, how the products that you sell them meet those needs and how will they meet those needs. And then the emotional side of it comes down to understanding what their values are. And just to explain that a bit further, here's Rachel again. So in terms of needs, she has needs about eco-credentials, wellness, we talked about that, holistic health, recognizable things that she can Instagram, easy to understand so she can share with her friends, into experiences, talk value, So when we're designing products for these consumers, these are the kind of needs we should be meeting. And then from an emotional level, we've already discussed, she's aspirational and progressive, balanced with herself and nature. She likes to have fun. She's socially conscious. She's not materialistic. And probably a whole number of other things that we haven't uncovered yet. And what this relates to in terms of this presentation is that actually your products are the things that meet the needs, and your brands are the things that speak to the values and the emotion of your consumers. And the implication of this is that a strong brand is more important than the best products. And it's the kind of thing that we all kind of know, but it really is this powerful. And it's why all of the big companies in the world spend much more money on their brand marketing and understanding their consumers than they do on actually developing products. To give you some examples of what I'm talking about, so Persil detergent used to be very, very popular. You know, Victoria Beckham once said she wished to be as famous as Persil Automatic. But they, in the late 2010s or early 2010s, were no longer the best-selling laundry detergent. At the time, everything was focused on product performance in terms of advertising, whiter than white and all of that other good stuff. What they did was they had the insight at the time that prisoners were spending more time outside than children. And if you wind the clock back kind of 5-10 years, there was a lot of concern about how the impact of social media, online gaming has on our kids. So they came up with this campaign that talks about dirt is good and that you should be encouraging your kids to go out and play. And so the rational benefit of this is that obviously it cleans dirty clothes. That's what we buy detergent for. But the emotional benefit is that people will think you're a good parent for letting your kids go out and play. And that, as I'm sure any parent knows, is a remarkably powerful feeling to have. And this was extraordinarily successful. So even after 3 months, they'd sold 12 million more washes worth of detergent, which had led to kind of a 2.1 increase in the value share. And 2.1 might not sound a lot, but it's the kind of thing, given the scale of these FMCG products, it's the kind of thing that people can retire on, make or break reputations, that kind of thing. So this was, it's used a lot. There's been lots of studies on it in terms of how a real insight can be used to create a real emotional link with your consumers. Another example, a bit closer to home, Brewdog, famously turned down by Dragon's Den. So they have rational benefit, distinctive, tasty craft beer. We can all understand that. And their emotional benefit is that they're anti-establishment. And their behaviors, the way they act, even now, it's all very, very highly congruent. So everything they do live and breathes this, and people really, really buy into it. And the interesting thing about it is that they've managed to maintain their brand values despite growing to a global scale. I was surprised. I visited my brother in Hong Kong a few years back. There was a Brewdog pub there, so I could get a punk IPA to cure the homesickness. And it commands premium prices. And now they're extending beyond core business into business strategy and such like. You know, they do their own equity. They're not on the stock exchange, that kind of thing. All very anti-establishment, all very emotionally led, and working incredibly well. Which leads us into brand identity. So if people believe and share the values with the company, they will stay loyal to the brand. So this is Howard Schultz. He's the CEO, or was the CEO of Starbucks. And he's effectively responsible for why our high street is now littered with coffee shops, and it's normal to spend £5 or more on a coffee. Prior to that, you'd have been laughed out of town. But so he clearly knows a thing or two about premiumization and how to attract consumers and keep consumers. And it's done through brand identity. So a brand consists of 4 key components in a clear hierarchy, and this defines your brand identity. So your vision, you really have to have a vision. So what's your vision of the future? What's your purpose? Who's going to share that vision with you? Because Turkey isn't going to vote for Christmas. So this has to be a positive vision of the future that people are prepared to come along with. And your values, we've talked a bit about values, but all brands have values. And the reason for this is to reflect and connect emotionally with your consumers. And of course, there's a personality. What do you want your personality to be? And these are all for you to kind of decide. And then at the lower level, you talk about the benefits. So what products you're offering to your consumers, and what consumer needs are you meeting, and your expression. So how do you bring all of these things to life? What's your design language? And in any marketing function anywhere around the globe, they spend hours and hours and hours and hours talking about the top two of those, because they believe that if you get that right, then the products and how you bring them to life start to become self-evident. And of course, your consumer sits at the heart of this, because it's about shared value, shared vision, delivering benefits and products that they want to use in a way that they feel reflects them. And if you can get this right, they'll become brand champions. But again, that the kind of the implication of this is that you can't be all things to all people. So the vision and your values are kind of up to you. I'm going to talk about the benefits and how you turn what we've done with the personas and the values and the needs, which derived from the WineGP data. You will, I'm sure, have ideas on who your consumers are and social media data that you can mine. So consumers, first and foremost, they buy benefits that meet their needs. If a product isn't better than another one, then there isn't any reason to buy it. So the job is to convince people that your products are better. So if we have a look at the needs for her that we've discussed, we can start to think of these individually and think of what kind of product benefits might be able to deliver against these kind of needs. So we'll start with wellness, this holistic health thing. From a product benefit point of view, there's a whole number. This is where you get your kind of brainstorming hat on, or you will know what it is that you make and how it might be relevant. But things like, moderate ABV, it could be vegan, it could be zero sugar, naturally made, locally produced, organic. These are all things that speak into the wellness need. And you may or may not have products that deliver against this already. And you could potentially make some that deliver against it in the future. It's not to say you can only make one style of product or experience for each group. You could look at experiences as well and then just talk about the product benefits. So you could walk the vines, you could be photogenic, you could be Insta-friendly, locally produced, meet the maker. All of these things, and I'm sure you've got more ideas on what you can do as well. But you're starting to link the products that you make with the consumer and her needs that deliver against an opportunity in the market. So it all tracks back to hopefully grow your business. Touch on brand expression. Again, people spend their lives trying to figure this out, and it's not easy, and people get it wrong all the time. Even the biggest companies get this wrong quite frequently. So just some kind of basic pointers for now. If you think you're modern and innovative, make sure you're not using a font that is old and scriptive. If you want to be traditional and premium, Comic Sans probably isn't the most appropriate way of demonstrating that as an image. Choice of colors, they're highly recognized throughout marketing agencies and advertising agencies to elicit different emotions and mean different things. So do your choice of colors deliver against your brand values, benefits, and vision. And of course, your choice of wines. So it's a bit crude, but you don't say your wines are vegan if you've also got a picture of a steak. And if you do that, you've got a chance of alienating pretty much everyone. The one thing that often gets missed with all of these things is that they all have to be congruent with each other. They all have to be synergistic. And they should all amplify your brand vision and values. And actually, a lot of the time you see people ruining campaigns or ruining brands by just getting a few things wrong and confusing their consumers, which doesn't work. So the details are important. I think it's good for the UK wine industry, actually, is that the details come from authenticity and knowing what you're talking about. And given that a lot of us make our own wine, we grow our own grapes, or if it's not that, hello Leo and the cat, we are very, very close to these things. So I would expect us to be quite good on the details as an industry. So simplicity of message. This, I think, is key, and it links quite well into the rest of the presentation as well. So a confused consumer doesn't buy. Lots of people have said it in different ways, but that's fundamentally it. Because if you're not sure why you should be making a purchase, you will just skip by that thing in the aisle and buy something that does. And you may have many, many good reasons why you think your wines should be bought, people should buy them, but it cannot be overstated how easy it is to confuse consumers. So what you do is you focus on what you think are the one or two most consumer relevant aspects of what you do, and use those as your primary kind of benefits in communicating with the consumer. And then you use some of the other elements as supporting documentation, if you like, substantiation for the kind of things that you're going to claim. And without trying to be too controversial, I don't think people will be overly surprised to say that English wine struggles to compete on quality of wine value alone. So there are a whole range of other reasons and benefits that people buy English wine beyond just the taste. And I think it's up for us and up for everyone here to kind of to recognize that and truly try and understand the reasons why people are buying their wine, because it isn't because it tastes of peaches and apricots for most people. So how do you get to what the message is? Every marketing agency around the world, marketing-led organization, uses concept cards to test your propositions with your target consumers. A concept card, there's kind of like a universal template that people use. It's got a name, it's got an image, it's got a strap line, what the proposition is, description of the product, focusing on the primary benefits, maybe with some supporting secondary information. What are the reasons to believe? So essentially, what are your credentials as a brand and a producer? And also what the price is, because you could say, I could ask, do you want a Ferrari? Well, yes, please. Thank you very much. Right. Well, that's £200,000, please. Okay, then I'm not buying it. So understanding purchase intent within all of this is actually vital within your business plan. And what this allows you to do is explore, when you're talking about these things, what works, what doesn't work, and why. You understand the kind of the benefits that people are interested in, the language that they might use, their views on your brand expression, so the label, the bottle, product design, and all of that kind of good stuff. The thing is, well, here's some examples that I just threw together. Bearing in mind, this is targeting Rachel here. So we've got an English fizz that is 11.5%, and it's fresh, it's fruity, it's modern for a balanced life. We've used modern winemaking techniques to create and finish, to create a fresh and fruity fizz at a strength you can enjoy without excess. I'll point out these haven't been legally checked, so I'm not sure how legit this is to claim, but it's an illustrative point. It's the perfect expression of modern winemaking excellence. And by the way, we're also vegan friendly and created in a way to minimize carbon footprint. And you can buy a bottle for £15. A few eyebrows might be raised at the price, but already starting to see sparkling wines in the supermarkets, English sparkling wines, at below this cost. And to this particular set of consumers, the production method probably doesn't really make much difference at all. So that's one concept. another one, different font, different type of image, just because we're trying to tease apart what works with the people we're trying to sell to. So our tasting area has panoramic views of the vineyard, so you can relax with your friends sipping wine that comes from the vines. The perfect way to spend an afternoon reconnecting with nature, with the glass in your hand. So this is thinking back to the wellness aspect for these consumers, connection with nature. And you can bring your own picnic, enjoy tasting in the vineyard. DIY tasting back, 3 bottles, £60. Now, the thing about all of these is that no one ever gets them right first time. I've never seen it happen, really. There's always some changes, some things that, because you work in an industry you think are obvious, the target consumers don't quite grasp or fail to understand, or isn't particularly relevant to them. So you undertake a round of consumer validation whereby you create a number of prototype concepts, just as I've illustrated there. You do, in the industry, it's called consumer co-creation kind of focus groups, where you work with your consumers to firstly pick apart the concepts and their meanings, and then discuss and rebuild. And then you end up with a set of revised brand concepts with a proposition that resonates, clear, relevant benefits, appropriate language, associated images, and all of that kind of thing. And big companies, especially when they're trying to be secretive because they've got brands to protect, they'll spend hundreds of thousands of pounds doing this kind of thing. You don't have to spend anywhere near that much money. Once you've identified who your target consumers are, you probably find quite a few of them. Your kids might know them, your cousins, your friends, the people who come to your property premises. So you can just sit down with them and ask them what they think, what they work, and it can help you refine your messages that then become incredibly powerful in getting your message out there. So, quick checklist for messaging. Successful brands connect with consumers at an emotional level, especially premium brands has to be emotionally led. They have relevant benefits and provide products that deliver on the brand promise set by the values and the vision. So are your brand vision and values clearly defined? Do you understand what the emotional and rational benefits of your vineyard and your wine are? I think right now, especially with Brexit and everything else, emotion, it is particularly salient, even more so than normal. Are these relevant to your target consumer? Because it's a real struggle to be relevant to everyone. I'm not saying you can't be relevant to more than one group, but it's about understanding and linking the values together to deliver the kind of things that, or at least the brand promise that will resonate with them. Does your brand expression amplify your vision, values, and product? And this for me is absolutely key. There's kind of the congruence with which these all fit together and how they're synergistic can have such a powerful effect. But you see it quite a lot where brands have a whole range of different adverts on social media or wherever, and individually they kind of make sense and they look quite cool and whatever. But when you view them as a whole, you're still left pondering what it is that brand is about, and you end up confused, and so you don't buy. So everything you do should be about amplifying your brand expression. Okay, and are your messages simple enough for people to understand? Why should they buy your wine over anyone else's? Just take how we do for time. Okay.
Yeah, we've got we're good for time, Ned. We've got a couple of questions come through.
Yep, sure.
We can either, do you want me to fire them now or wait till the end?
Would they be relevant now, or I'm happy either way?
No, I mean, well, one was about getting the data. A question asked, where are you getting the data from to define the needs and values of the different segments? Is it a sort of fairly standard data set? Because obviously you were able to match various brands with those, particularly with Rachel as a consumer.
Yeah.
Example.
So a lot of that comes down to experience. I've been working with these things for kind of 10 years, and it's a bit of an art, and never is it 100% accurate. And you can spend £1 million trying to validate them totally, but that kind of misses the point, which is that they're representative to help us dissect a market, and the differences between them are relative. So I'm very much an 80-20 kind of person. You can get to 80% through the data that we got from the WineGB social media, which gives you information such as the age range, their special interests, where they live. There's a reason Rachel lives in Brighton, is because we have a relatively high level of engagement from Brighton. There's a reason she's into wellness, because that comes through in their social media. So all of these things are kind of, you can then piece them together, and just kind of using experience from other segmentations, start to create something that seems plausible. One thing I would say through the social media data that we saw, talking about being relevant to more than one cohort or segment, is that there was a very strong kind of outdoors activities link for all of the different segments that we've got.
Yeah, so it's just starting to build up the profile from the material that one can gather.
Yes.
Through the exercises that we do.
Okay. Yeah, and something's better than nothing. If you've got something written down, you can start to critique it. You can start to see where it makes sense, where it doesn't. You probably, like I say, you probably know some of these people anyway. So it just see if it becomes useful for you.
So even at that stage, you can actually go out to the contacts that you have, because going back a few slides, you were going through that particular exercise, but you actually at those fairly early stages, you can actually call upon people that you know already, be they customers, be they people who follow you on social media, or whoever you're.
Absolutely, and we'll come on to. I'm not going to delve too far into social media, because there's been a lot of webinars on it already. But you can, if you don't have a multi-billion-dollar brand to ruin, you can do these kind of things on social media, because it gives you diagnostics of how long people have looked at your different messages, your different web pages. And so you can see which ones people are spending a lot of time reading, and which ones they bounce from. And bounce is the term that's used when you click on something and you instantly go, oh no, and you go back. So using that and just piecing it together like a jigsaw, you can actually get a pretty decent starting view of who your consumers are.
Excellent. Yeah, I suspect we'll probably have a webinar session about getting analytics, getting better diagnostics and analytics from social media. But anyway, that's for another time. Ned, that's great. Thanks. Yes, I'll hand back to you.
Okay, thank you, Julia, and thanks for the question. So the final section is media. Like I said, I know there's been other webinars on social media and how to use it and such like. So I'm not going to delve too far into it, but only to illustrate the point of how having these refined brand and product messages end up being really powerful. Let's move on. So right message, right people, right way. That's my saying. Lots of other people have their variation, but I didn't want to attribute it to myself. You spent a lot of time and effort, maybe a lot of money, maybe not. I don't think that's particularly important, on creating your strong brand propositions. You've got your values, you've got your expression, and you've done this based on consumer knowledge. Now, the beauty of this is that it isn't only relevant to your consumers, but it's relevant to your local businesses, it's relevant to wholesale, it's relevant to on-trade and international. Now, probably for international, you will need a different set of messages, because their views on us as a country and a product range will be different. But all of these people are trying to sell your wine for your benefit and theirs. So if you just imagine going into, let's say we've got a local restaurant. If you go in there and say, I've got this lovely wine, it's made from these grapes and it tastes of orange blossom and mango. So, right, okay, fine. Sounds lovely. If you go in there and say, well, I've got this local wine, it's made 10 miles down the road, it's a lovely young couple, and it goes really well with the type of food that you're serving, vegan, curry, whatever. You're giving them the things that they can repeat to their customers in order to help them buy it, and you can reassure them that you've done your research to suggest that these are the kind of things that that people will buy. So it's win-win for everyone. And just a little anecdote so from Oatly Vineyard, Kate Lawler, who, I mean, most people probably won't remember, but she was the first female to win Big Brother. She's got about 200,000 followers on Instagram, and she visited the vineyard. Perfectly lovely. I wasn't there. Mum and Dad didn't know who she was. I wouldn't have known either, to be fair. And at the time, unbeknownst to the general public, she was driving because she was pregnant, and that's now been announced, so it's fine. And so, but she did do quite a nice little video of her and her friends tasting the wine in the rain. It was the first day it had rained for ages. And she said, well, I'm in this lovely Somerset vineyard and we're drinking their crisp and dry white wine. How is it, husband? Oh, well, it's perfectly quaffable. Now, she hasn't tasted it, but Mum and Dad have for a long time used crisp and dry as a kind of consumer relevant communication language for their wines. And so all of a sudden you've got people coming, not even trying it, replaying your messages, because over the years they figured out that that's the kind of language that their particular customers respond to. And if you understand the kind of language and the messages that people respond to, then that spreads across all channels. So all advertising channels, whether it's face-to-face, whether it's email, newspapers. We've seen simple messages on the side of a bus. You can even telephone people, keep in touch with your wholesale and your on trade. What is it that their customers are saying? And of course, social media. And I will touch on that just a little, because it's often said that traditional marketing is dead. And by that, they mean the kind of mega millions of pounds putting up billboards, TV adverts, and everything else just doesn't pay anymore. It doesn't pay off. And the reason for that is social media. And the good news for us is that allows us all to be very smart about and efficient about how we can build our brands and our presence to increase awareness, going back to the point at the start. So a quick view. So we've talked about the marketing funnel. Break that down from a social media point of view into reach, retargeting, and then repeat purchase. And to extend reach, and this is basically building awareness. So who is going to buy your wine, and how can you get in touch with them efficiently and easily, and in a way that they're likely to believe. So it starts, of course, by understanding your target consumer, their values, their needs, the brands that are relevant to them. You remember I had some other brands around her image in the persona, and what her interests are. And then you find out, who do they follow? Kind of lifestyle, restaurants, local businesses. Local businesses are a very, very good source of kind of publicity and marketing and probably purchase, because for this particular segment, think nothing of spending £500,000 on lip fillers. Spend a lot of time in very high-end beauty salons. Always like to have a drink with their manicure and everything else. So there's some really interesting opportunities to sell more through local businesses if you just cast your net a bit wider. And taking this approach, putting your consumer first, understanding what their needs and their interests are, will allow you to do that. And what you then do is you follow the people that they follow, and you spread each other's message. And this is done very simplistically by engaging meaningfully. The social media platforms really, really reward kind of meaningful interaction, which is a bit more than liking. Are you commenting? Are you being helpful? Are there responses? You could even think about moving into collaborations. But of course, the key to the success of this is your simple messages, that you have already checked with the target consumers by approaching or going through the people that they like. You are extending that reach into more versions of the same person who are likely to respond to your simple messages in simple and relevant messages, I should say, in a similar way. And so all of that effort you put in up front to understand what your brand values are and what your product strategy is and all of that good stuff, the language and everything else, it pays dividends when you get to this point, because it actually becomes very easy to understand what it is you should be doing. So rather than sitting there saying, oh, well, I think I should be on social media and I wonder what I should be posting, here's an approach of, well, I know what I want to say and I know how to say it to a lot more people. So, okay, fine, great, let's crack on. And good news with this is the vast majority of micro and midi influences, exposure is used for currency. So it's kind of quid pro quo, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And why this is relevant to the majority of UK wine producers is if I follow Moet and Chandon and they tell me something about champagne or a promotion that they've got or anything else, I'm unlikely to listen. If I follow a local chef whose restaurant I really like, and they've got a large Instagram following, if they tell me to buy this wine because it goes with their food, I'm going to listen, because I actually respect their opinion rather than just kind of taking an interest in the world in general. And those kind of micro and midi influences are likely to kind of work with you on this. So it doesn't have to cost much, if anything, to get this going. I won't delve too far into this, but this idea of retargeting, and this is how you drive people through the marketing funnel from the initial engagement into the purchase. And the way it works is that essentially your consumers, potential customers, they engage with your content that you've put out there in the world, your messages that we've just discussed. And the pixels allow this to be tagged and tracked. So the things that they're looking at, Facebook knows, and then next time they return to Facebook, it displays a targeted advert that is more relevant, hopefully, than the content they initially engaged with. That causes them to click on the link, which drives them back to being tagged and tracked. And after a while, you can refine the message to that particular consumer so that they end up making a purchase. So just to kind of clarify, a pixel, lots of talk about it, but it's really just a small piece of code you can put on a web page, and it collects data. You can put it on all of your web pages to kind of fully understand what people are looking at, how long for, and everything else. And this data allows you to understand who's looking at your media. Facebook holds huge amounts of information, demographics, interests, think Cambridge Analytica here, that they managed to utilize this to quite a few people's benefit. Allows you to track what people are looking at and for how long. And the assumption is the longer someone's looking at one page means they're more interested in that page than the page that they bounced away from. This allows you to retarget potential consumers with relevant information and helps you build audiences for future campaigns. So everyone's got Christmas coming up. If you've got a set of consumers who are likely to be interested in your products, and you've got some good messages for them, the beauty of this is that once someone has even clicked on one of your links, you then have permission to retarget them through their social media and everything else. And you see it all the time. And this is why the traditional marketing model is not really working for many consumers. Direct to consumer, not working for many companies, because direct to consumer is basically becoming the battleground for a lot of companies. Just to kind of illustrate that very, very quickly, and why your simple messages need to be prepared in advance. So here's Rachel. She's come to our website. There's an About Us page, a sustainability page, a wines page, and a tours and experiences page. She has spent a lot of dwell time reading about our tours and experiences. And so next time she goes to social media, she is going to see a simple, relevant message about tours from our vineyard that is going to enable her to re-engage and hopefully move her into the purchase. the kind of I guess the implication for everyone here is that what's useful to have is not just one or two messages, but kind of like a matrix or a worksheet of messages that can be used for different kinds of consumers looking at different kinds of things at different times as well. So kind of prepared in advance is very good. Then let's moving into champions. The reason champions are important is because repeat purchase is 6 times cheaper. So it said, I'm sure that number varies, but the fact is they already know you, they already like you, and they already trust you. And if you can build personal relationships with customers, you've engaged them emotionally and they're hooked into your brand and they become brand champions. And people who are passionate about your brands, about their favorite brands, passion is created at an emotional level. An emotional connection is built through your brand, and that shares your values and creates a relationship with you. Trust is built by consistently meeting expectations set by the brand. And it's that simplicity of message that allows them to share this with everyone. And if you manage to get this right, they'll start shouting for you and building your own awareness. So this isn't a kind of a linear process. Going through this, you will hopefully create these champions who will then shout your word, and you will also learn more and you'll get better at this. So it's a really powerful approach to use social media to really, really grow awareness in your products, in your brand. And like I say, Joanna and Julia are doing a great job of this already with WineGB, and there is lots more exciting stuff to come at the category level. So just a quick checklist, as always. So creating awareness with your target consumers is fundamental to building your brand and increasing sales. The key to being effective and efficient is by targeting the right message to the right people in the right way. I hope I made that clear. So is your media plan designed with the right goals in mind? And are you setting up to create champions? Do you have your simple messages ready to roll? And does your media amplify your brand values and products? Inconsistent messaging does confuse people because there's kind of, without trying to get too smart about it, but throughout the marketing funnel, if you create any form of cognitive dissonance, no matter how small, and it might even be seen to be imperceptible, but cognitive dissonance is kind of add up to a point where people just go, no, I don't know why, I just don't like it. And so the purpose of this whole kind of consumer-centric approach to marketing is so that it just becomes what you're offering just becomes the obvious choice, because there are none of these cognitive dissonances getting in the way of that. And finally, do you build relationships with your customers? The emotional bond with your brand is far stronger than having the best products. And that's more or less it. So just where we started, the 3 M's. I hope you either were in a way or you now feel strongly equipped to deal with these messages. I hope I've covered them all in enough depth, and I hope I've convinced you why all the big companies and consumer-facing companies talk about brands rather than their products, because it's about brand building, which encapsulates the products, but therefore connecting at an emotional level. So just some closing thoughts. We're a broad industry, so there is the question of scale, and your approach will differ depending on your scale, but consumer awareness is always relevant. If you're under 10,000 bottles, you've probably got lifestyle drivers, which means probably you are your brand. So it's important to figure out what your vision and values are, who these are relevant to, and how do I reach them. And maybe you already know this already, but definitely writing them down becomes very useful, because you'll become more aware, and that will help you be more effective as well. If you make more than 10,000 bottles, you've probably got business drivers. You might have investors who are wondering where their money is. You might have a warehouse full of wine that you need to sell. And in this instance, you're likely to brand for market. and running through the process, you're looking at identifying opportunities and threats. You're going to define your target consumers based on where you think your biggest opportunity is, and you're likely to refine your brand for them. And of course, the market is constantly evolving, and right now, UK wine at least is at the bottom of an S curve, and an S curve is it's a descriptor that's the shape of an S, and at the bottom, things start at the bottom. They tend not to be quite so good. It's a new product, it's a new technology, but then more and more people start getting involved in improving the products, and then they go through rapid rise in quality and performance, and typically cost reduction as well, before they get to the top. And you could argue that where at the top it tends to kind of level off, progress levels off, and then eventually maybe it declines. And you could say that maybe the French wine industry, with its appellations, its AOCs, all of that kind of thing, it is quite steady. It's kind of at the top of the S curve, but UK wine is right at the bottom, or right at the point where it's accelerating. And so there's going to be a huge amount of change. And so how are you going to ensure you stay relevant in 5 years? And I've talked a number of things around the evolving consumer landscape, the boom bust cycles. We don't yet know what's going to happen in terms of regulation and trade deals and that kind of thing. Even the financial markets are likely to have an impact. So this isn't a one-off exercise, and should be something that is kind of done or maintained on a yearly basis at least, or at least constantly at the top of your mind, and certainly if you're in the bigger side of the game. Okay, so really final slide from me, and I hope you don't mind me taking the liberty. I do hope you found everything so far useful. I really do hope that you'll be able to take this away and refine what you're doing. I did think though, if you want to know more, I thought it might be useful to run a coaching course over the winter months. I mean, harvest is almost over. And kind of 3 webinars covering each of these areas much in depth, giving you much more tools, much more examples, helping you bring them to life. And if that's something that people feel they would like, then I'd be happy to run that. We can discuss the format, but essentially cost there of about £350, or if you want some individual time with me as well to help you refine what you've done, that's fine. And also, actually, if there's just bits and pieces of this that you feel you haven't quite got down or would like some extra advice on or anything else, you can also always come and ask me, and I'm happy to help. There needs to be a critical mass to make this viable, the coaching course. So if people are interested, then please get in touch by the 18th of November. So that we can schedule and plan and make sure that it delivers against what you're expecting as well. So I hope you don't mind that pitch. I do think it will be valuable to some people. So take it as that, please. And with that, that's me done. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Ned, thank you for that. Incredibly thought-provoking, and I'm sure, and I have absolutely no doubt that it's going to help people perhaps take a slightly different approach to it. And I think you said it's refining your brand, because obviously so many have got their established brands, they've got their products, so they're thinking, oh, where do I start and how do I do it? And it's very salutary that this is something that you have to keep on top of regularly. So thank you for sharing all of that. Really appreciate it. Now, just a couple of questions actually. There's one which actually was from a little bit earlier on. Given this age group and others, I think obviously this is when you were talking about our friend Rachel, and others are becoming more environmentally aware. How important is organic or sustainable accreditation? Are they aware of certification schemes, or are they satisfied with good environmental image? So I suppose this is the sort of relationship between the brand values, but also these other individual forms of accreditation for these standards.
It's a very good question, and the targets are moving quite quickly and depend a lot on the generation as well. So traditionally, if you're talking eco, you have kind of at one end of the spectrum, you've got eco tree hugging, and then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got technology which is bad and killing the planet. What now seems to be the case is that technology and environment need to act together, and technology is needed to solve the environmental issues. So all the things around kind of quote unquote sustainable are starting to be taken for a given. But the other thing to say about that is that brands that build themselves entirely on sustainable and eco rarely do well. So these are the kind of secondary parts. So yeah, absolutely relevant to certain consumer groups, such as our experientials. They're probably just looking for the label or the sticker to make them feel better. Mm-hmm. If you think about maybe the boomers or people with more time on their hands, who have the time to read about how much water you're using, or how many pesticides you're using and all of that kind of thing, then it will be relevant to them as well, but in different ways. And that's why tailoring your messages and understanding who your consumers are so you can tailor those messages becomes important.
Brilliant. Oh, that's great. Well, thank you. That's really interesting, actually. One other question, Ned, do you have any pointers on what impact COVID might have on consumer behaviour in respect of the market for English wine? And obviously we've got Christmas coming up as well, so we're sort of coming out of, or are we living through another phase of COVID? Yeah. But we've actually got a big sort of market ahead of us.
So there was no coincidence that one of the concepts that I put together was based around DIY tastings, because what a number of vineyards that I've spoken to, and Oatly is the same, is that traditionally you would be looking at, most people who visit are from the nest flown or the boomer category of people, and lo and behold, therefore a lot of the marketing, a lot of the talk, a lot of the language used was geared towards those kind of people, and talking to them about the things that they expect to hear and have got the time to hear. However, lots of people have found more of the younger cohorts coming out, because you can't go abroad, just want to spend some time in the countryside. I don't have a garden and everything else. I also don't want to listen to a producer talking about their winemaking processes. I want to taste some nice local wine. I want to go and sit in a vineyard. And a few people who I've spoken to say that has really, really taken off. Obviously, it's going to be problematic if you sell directly to the trade. But I think COVID in and of itself will be a good thing for UK vineyards, because it's reminded people of how good things can come close to home. And I think ultimately, whatever your views, I think Brexit will have a similar effect, and it's wise to be prepared.
Yeah, and a chance to connect with those customers a bit more as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yes, it's been a strange year, hasn't it? But I think that everyone is looking forward to Christmas and an opportunity to try and forget about everything. And I think connecting with consumers about English wine, there's a huge amount of goodwill for the industry, for the people that know about it. The industry's biggest challenge, I think, is just general category awareness among general wine consumers. So I'm pretty sure lots of people would like to be tapped on the shoulder and said, oh, well, English wine's great. It'll go great with your Christmas meal or your canapes or whatever. And by the way, your nearest vineyard is local, well, probably closer than you think.
Well, there's still time, isn't there, using some of those fantastic steps that you've outlined in your presentation to actually start looking at something with a view to Christmas.
Yes, I think now's the time to start planning.
No, that's great. Ned, again, thank you so much. We've run over, but actually I'm pleased to say really that the number of attendees who are still tuning in and didn't leave on the dot of 7 o'clock shows just how fascinating this talk has been, how people have been absolutely glued to it, which is great.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
No problem. We'll put this recording up on the website in due course. It'll be available on YouTube, and then and you can link that through from our website. So we'll get that up as soon as possible, because I'm sure that many more people will want to have a look at it. And just to remind, it's ned@auticconsultant.com. Yeah, it's there on the slide if people want to contact you. And great to hear about the opportunity of having a course up and running with any luck, this side of Christmas, which will be brilliant. So everybody, thank you again for attending. Ned, again, many thanks for a fascinating presentation. I'm sure there'll still be more questions coming in after all of this, once people have taken it away and processed it, but I'm sure this will be a topic that we'll be covering in a future webinar as well.
Great.
So thank you very much indeed, and thanks again to everybody for joining in.
You're welcome, and have a good evening, everyone. Good luck with harvests that are left as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ned. Cheerio.
Bye-bye.
Bye.